Okay, we're recording.
Awesome. Welcome everyone to our Planning Commission meeting this evening. Let's go ahead and get started with a Pledge of Allegiance. If you all please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I've asked Commissioner Wilcox to give us a thought and/or prayer, so we'll turn the time over to her.
Thanks. Just a quick little thought with what's happened the last couple of weeks with the Olympics. I absolutely love the Olympics. I'm a fanatic. My family just laughs at me because I just love it. Anyway, I love how the athletes come together, and it says they not only respect each other, they support each other, they embrace each other, even if their countries are divided by conflict. Even if just for a few weeks we can forget what's going on in the world and enjoy being one. The ultimate goals of the Olympics are to cultivate human beings through sport and contribute to world peace. The president of the IOC said in the closing ceremonies, "In our fragile world, when division, conflict, and mistrust are on the rise, we show the world, yes, it is possible to be fierce rivals while at the same time living peacefully and respectfully together. This is the mission of the Olympic Games, bringing us together in peaceful competition, always building bridges, never erecting walls, uniting humankind in all of our diversity." And that's what I love about the Olympics, just for a short time, just the world being one in a way, and everyone supporting and all that. And I just hope that we can all just remember that we're all just one race, the human race, and learn to live in harmony when we disagree and have different views. So that's it. And then I'll say a quick prayer.
Great, thanks.
Dear Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for all the many blessings that have given to us, and we're grateful for this opportunity we have to come and meet as a commission, that we will be able to do what is best for this city, that we'll be able to let it grow and become what we need it to be. And we love thee and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, let's move right along. We've got two things on the agenda tonight, both with Corey's name on them. So let's turn the time over to Corey to talk about parking.
Thank you, Chair Daly. We're kind of getting on the latter end of our parking study. What I've tried to do in your packet is provide just a table. It's limited to the amendments, so if you look back at the EIS parking study, there were a lot more uses listed in their discussion, but I've just selected the ones to amend in this table. So I attached the ESI parking study for your reference, or if you want to add anything else to it. But tonight's purpose is just to go through, the purpose was to take that study where they were doing a ratio and convert it over to the way our parking works in the tabulation, so that there's a consistency. And so I went through to do those different conversions that were needed. I have showed you in red what would be proposed as an amendment. In our parking ordinance, we have another column in the table that has notes, and so where a note existed, it shows in the text in the black color, and if the proposing any amendments, it would be shown in the red color. And then I put some staff comments in just to try to highlight some elements to discuss it with you. I can go over highlights, we can go over it line by line. I know that some would like to be able to maybe get out early tonight. So my prediction is that they're going to last an hour, and then I always times that 1.5, so my prediction is 8:30. So anybody that wants to go less than that to prove me wrong, I'm okay with. But I know, like an example, the church would be an important example to point out. How did that play out, some of those elements? So what's your wishes?
Well, no, I think for me, I went through, read through these, looked at the changes, and made some notes myself about stuff. One of them is church, and see what that would do to things. I wouldn't mind just asking a few questions, talking about a few things, clarifying a couple of things, and I don't know if everybody else has a similar idea. So
Yeah, it's your discretion for discussion and what you want to talk about.
yeah, good. So, it's interesting that you mentioned church, because I did look at that to see, I looked at 4 different churches around Centerville to see, they were all LDS churches. So, there's the, pretty much straight east from here, a stake center built in the 70s. That one has 231 parking stalls in it. According to the proposed requirement, it looks like it would require about 182, so it'd be okay on that one. I looked at the old white church. That's a unique one over there, special situation. It has, so on that one, Corey, there's angled parking on the streets, but that's not, is that in the public right of way, or is that out of the public right of way?
I actually think it's partly in both on that street.
Okay.
I think there's a right-of-way line, and then the rest of it encroaches into the private side of the property line.
So that would count, though, as off-street parking? Because it's,
In today's ordinance, no, because we don't allow backing cars onto streets from any parking today.
gotcha.
But it's grandfathered the way it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm just, part of what I was looking at is, because if the church were to decide to make any significant renovations to that building,
It would
would affect it.
potentially cause the change for the parking to come up to current specifications, which is parking is to be on site and no backing of vehicles onto the public street. You actually have to use a driveway.
Yeah.
Which church is that?
Where the well is?
You're talking about the one where the well is?
Yeah, the church where the well is, the old white church between First and Second South.
Yeah, okay.
Yep,
It has semi-on-street parking.
Yeah.
semi-on-street parking, yeah, exactly. If you can't use the on-street parking, it's way under, like not even close.
But if you do count that, it's probably close.
It's very close. I came up with 135, and it kind of depends on how you count that on-street parking. And I guess, and these are all just estimates based on Google Maps and looking at the building footprint, and that one's got some second stories on it, and whatever else. That one's within 4, I think, on that one. I did look at some newer churches. I think the two of the newer churches in the city are the one over on 4th West, that one, and then
Pinea.
Yep, the Pinea one, and then there's one pretty much on the border of
On Lane.
Farmington, yeah, up there. I think those
Fairly new.
those are some of the newest ones.
Yeah.
They're almost identical, those two. And they are, they've got plenty of parking available on both of those, so. Anyway,
What's interesting in the church to think about is I use the bridge community because that was somewhat of a driver in the sense of they were buying a building, reusing it from the flex, well, it wasn't flex space, it was the old Brian Glass
right,
unit. It was at limited stalls based on the industrial use at the time. They wanted to convert it to a small community church. They only had 35 stalls that were on site, actually, and it was a conditional use. So the discussion in the planning commission is, well, you're probably going to need more parking than what's on the site. And so then they went through the parking modification system, where they then went to surrounding properties and got commitments for off-site parking. And then there's the whole debate, does it compete with the user on the site versus the weekend, maybe for the church use? And there's a significant number of stalls the commission was okay with, but they were predominantly off-site. And that's something that we probably ought to later talk about on the parking modification is, at what point should off-site parking count? Is it a predominant allowance? Or in the parking modification, we say you have to have on-street or off-street parking for your entire use, but then the parking modification says, oh, we might count some on-street. And I think that's a little bit of a mixed message in the parking. So we have more to discuss about that, but I think that this church example at the Bridge community brings up all of those elements.
yeah, and I think, I've mentioned this in here before, but my lesson learned from that one is that I think we need to be a little bit more discriminating when it comes to permitted uses in different types of zones, right? So that area is zoned
Industrial high.
industrial high, exactly. So it's built for the warehouses and the, what, low parking intensity uses.
Yeah,
And
we haven't
went-
had the, what we call the mega churches, the big box church issues in industrial areas.
Sure, but.
Someday, but not yet.
Yeah, but that's the problem, is that churches tend to be more parking intensive, because everybody drives to church and they're there, and that's a part of the issue with the Bridge Community Church as well, and, anyway.
Well, and they were a small congregation on their parking demand, but that doesn't mean that that congregation doesn't have ability to grow. I mean, that's obviously their goal, is to serve as many people in the area as they can, and as that popularity of a small community church grows, relying on 30 stalls becomes potentially
Right.
problematic.
Yeah, that's true, and I think, planning for their success is one of those things. We hope they grow, I guess, and do that.
So Corey, is it your understanding that I'm sorry if I'm interrupting, but just to piggyback on your question, though, this 7 spaces per 1,000 square feet, and how that compares to 1 space per 6 seats, and then 1 per 100 square feet above, is the 7 per 1,000 square feet typically going to result in a sum total of less parking than the prior requirement?
Not necessarily. So the example of the Bridge Community Church is the building is much larger than the assembly area, but we were only calculating the assembly area, not any auxiliary uses that might occur simultaneously.
So that square footage isn't the footprint of the entire building, it's just the assembly space?
Our current code is just the assembly space.
Okay.
And if you have fixed seating, it's measured how much bench area. If you have unfixed seating, then it's
Yeah.
the other calculation. But the ESI is recommending to go to the gross square footage.
And see, that's one of the reasons why I singled out churches and started to do some of my own calculations to look at that as well, is because as we shift toward requiring a parking stall for the bathroom, what's that gonna mean for the whole site, right? And so,
Yeah, you get anyone who's in the bathroom is someone who's in the assembly, so you're counting them twice at that point, right? So it gets into that game of,
Yeah, it does. I think what happened is that was easy on the parking modification for the Bridge community because they came in and said, look, we only have this service at this time. But I don't think all churches function with a singular congregation service. And so now you have multiple portions of the building being used. And so that demand changes from just the assembly area.
there's overlap,
Yeah.
yeah.
but I do think it makes sense to do it based on the gross floor area of the building, because, in theory, you could have the whole building being used in one way or another. Even at a place like the Bridge Community Church, they have classrooms along the one side, I think, if I
Yes.
remember right. So they could have stuff going on in the main assembly area, the classrooms are busy, and that makes more sense than just to focus on
Just the assembly area.
just the assembly area. Yeah. So,
It might make sense to at least just consider occupied spaces, which, electrical rooms
you're
and
taking out the-
janitor closets and toilet rooms are not occupied spaces.
Yeah, and we can do that from time to time, particularly if you have a mixed uses in the building. We'll just say, okay, what's this use, what's that use? I think what ESI was doing is not worried about the bathroom space, just generally what size of building generates 7 per 1,000, irregardless of mechanical and bathroom facilities. Because you'll note back, he did some comparisons in his study.
yeah. One of the other questions, moving on to a different area now, Corey, is bed and breakfasts and hotel. So we have 1.5 spaces per room for bed and breakfast, whether it's a home or an inn, as the proposed, but then for the hotel, 1.15 spaces per room. And you put in this note here that 2 previous micro hotels believed that our current ordinance required too many for their
Yes.
hotel operation. First of all, I didn't know we had any micro hotels in the city.
We don't. We had 2 proposed on the west side. One at the vacant concrete rubble pile place.
Across the street from the Maverick.
And then the other one is a lot next to Maverick. And one of their complaints about our current code is that they don't do an assembly area, and they felt like our current code was too much parking for what they needed. But the issue that we argued during that time is, what if we have a hotel that has a conference center? Now you have potentially people staying in travel, people staying for the conference, people staying somewhere else and traveling to the conference. And so that's why I kind of modified it a little bit, because I was saying, okay, the microtel, where you're not doing conference space, they pretty much were arguing what ESI's putting in there at the 1.15. We made some arguments back then, well, you do have a few employees, so, you got to account for that. But that's why I left in the red column under the notes is saying, oh, okay, that's fine if you're just renting a room. But if you add a conference facility, that's going to create a greater parking demand. And so I added the one space per 200 square feet of assembly banquet area.
So, but on the hotel, really all you've changed then is to go from 1.5 to 1.15. Because the one space per 200 square feet stays the same.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And the 1.15 is more than one per room, but I think the difference is your bed and breakfast, the 1.5 is calculating the operator probably into that, where the 1.15 is counting a few employees that will operate the facility in addition to the parking for the room. So the 1.5 starts creating the employee and service staff parking.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question, is walk me through the logic of 1.5 for bed and breakfast versus 1.15 for the hotels.
Yeah.
Do we have a limit on the size of a bed and breakfast,
We don't. The assumption is you have two versions of it, the one in the home, and then you have most of your other type of, or just home, they might be converted homes, but they're finding the arterials, a larger estate home, purposely creating a corporate commercial bed and breakfast. You don't. And so then you do have a small operator, most likely, still. And the ESI just seemed to say, hey, if you're dealing with bed and breakfast, the 1.5 or whatever it is will get you the operator and the room.
And not to get too much into the weeds on this one, but what's the distinction between a hotel and a bed and breakfast?
I don't remember the definition.
I mean, I'm just thinking about, because, you go to
I think a hotel is called out as a different definition, and I think the bed and breakfast is actually boarding and lodging under our definition, if I
Yeah.
remember. I'm digging
Because-
deep into the cobwebs.
part of what I'm thinking here is that, and it doesn't, well, if you had your 80-room, well, this doesn't work, whatever.
Well, maybe there's a room capacity maximum where like a bed and breakfast isn't going to have 80 rooms. Typically, they're going to be smaller,
Yeah.
with 12 or less rooms. They're much smaller than a hotel.
Well, here, Mackenzie's brought up the definition, the bed and breakfast is a limited commercial activity. Is that a limited at 50 rooms, 25 rooms, 10 rooms?
Room, okay.
Sorry.
No, that's
Go on
okay.
to find hotel.
But sometimes hotels have cooking facilities.
They do.
now. Sometimes they have a restaurant in the
Yeah,
basement,
just with or
in the ground
without, yeah.
floor.
May provide, restaurants and
Yeah.
meetings.
But I also think it's easier under the licensing program because a hotel is going to be called out as a different category under the federal identification versus a bed and breakfast. So one will be oriented towards the limited service and another one will be the commercial service under their licensing.
Yeah.
An example would be is a drink shop or a bagel shop is different under the federal categories of their business licensing than fast food like pizza or In-N-Out Burger or something like that. In-N-Out didn't pay me to promote that, but
That's what you had for lunch today?
yeah, there are some how their corporation is created and how they file what their operator permit's going to be.
Yeah. And then, okay, sorry, a couple more quick questions. Maybe Mackenzie, could you pull up, so under bank and financial institution, it talks about stacked spaces per CZC 125260D1. Could you pull up 12?
Yeah, I think the stacked spaces for banks are 3.
52.
This goes back to the other question that In-N-Out Burger and Chick-fil-A they're only required to have 5 stacked stalls. We all know how that works. And I think bank and finance, if I remember right, is 3,
1252, 60,
and a bank is 3.
1. So, 60D, wait, it says D1, but there's no 1.
There isn't a D1.
Did I misreference it?
Oh, wow, sorry, hold on. We're just slowly thinking here.
Number and type of parking, is any of that? Because it's its own little category in the list, like 3 or 4 uses for stacked spacing.
Is it 90? 1252, 90? Stacked space 10 by 20, that's all it says.
Go down to, oh, there's only a B, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Let's do stacking in a search.
okay.
Anyway, I was just kind of wondering, because that is a thing that we've talked about a lot, you know, trying to prevent. It came up just recently with the future Chipotle, is making sure that the stacking
Yeah,
stays on site.
so here's your stacked space.
Oh, you found it.
Bank drive-through 3, car wash
80.
3 or 4, depending on what you're doing, gasoline pump 1, fast food 5.
Well, and I think the Quick Quack has more than 4 on a car wash.
Yes, they have 2 lanes
They
going
have 2
in.
lanes, and it's like, they have more than 4 stacked, but
But the point is, they weren't required to.
They're going
Right.
above and beyond.
they potentially knew their business model and what it needed.
Yeah. But I don't know that, I mean, that's the hard part, is that sometimes you build the drive-through and you're never gonna get there,
Yeah,
you know? Like, Taco Time over here.
yeah.
When have you ever seen Taco Time start to spill out?
During the World Series, when they still a base, still a taco?
Oh, that's Taco Bell.
Oh. Right,
Yeah.
but yeah, either one.
Yeah. But, yeah, In-N-Out is always spilling out.
But I do think the stacked issue is something also to consider in updating and maybe looking at. So an example is a recent article for Burger King and Chipotle. This whole delivery process is inefficient for fast food particularly because it costs them up to 30% of the meal price for a delivery option, but it was a way to survive in COVID, but operate in the red. So now Burger King, Chipotle has what explained, I read this just recently after Chipotle said what they do. It's an online order, and that's where you get permission to go through their drive-through. It's not going to the drive-through and place an order.
Yeah.
Burger King and a couple other restaurants are expanding their drive-through capacity because they think that's where their
The direction.
future and direction is. And so, you know, it's taking Chick-fil-A, which is a single lane, figured out a way to be more efficient with a single lane. And now I saw the model on Burger King, both sides are coming in, and it just looks like a little kiosk where the food's being created, and then it's just shipped out to 6 lanes in Burger King's new prototype.
Yeah.
So stack spacing, you know, we do need to think about, that's probably where the potential future is for this type of service, because delivery's not good enough, and moving people to be quicker through that line, since they're not dining in as much, is the way they're trying to be more creative with their business model. So we're going to see some changes.
Yeah,
Likely.
looking at this list here, you know, 3 per lane for a bank, yeah, I mean,
Sounds like a 1985
yeah.
calculation.
Who goes to the bank anymore, really? But,
Sometimes there's a line at the ATM.
Usually, let's see, you can't make fun of people over 50, so anything 49 and older is using the bank drive-through. Everybody else is,
Well, banks have started to just install ATMs now,
Yeah.
and not even
there's no teller.
there's no tell. it's
everything's
just-
on the online banking
Yeah,
app.
we put one in Harriman, there's one in Farmington where it's just the kiosk.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
So the only reason why I bring this up is to, you know, talk about, it seems like fast food is going to be where our potential heartache comes from is that. And, you know, to talk about Chick-fil-A, it seems like they've reworked the way their drive-through line goes, but at the expense of parking,
Sure.
right?
I mean, the pandemic, of course, affected all that too.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
They couldn't do in restaurants, so it all became dry. I mean, yeah, so they took over their whole parking lot to make that happen.
Right.
But even now, it's difficult as a pedestrian to get through that maze to be a walk-in restaurant person, goer. You know, like, there's no clear way to get, you gotta pay attention. It's like playing Frogger.
Yeah, that's a
Really-
good description.
You really gotta pay attention.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
That's a good game to reference. That's
That's
exactly what it
That's a
is.
good,
Yeah.
yeah,
But
that's true. Okay. Because this ESI study really didn't talk about stacking, did it?
No.
Just parking.
Didn't.
Okay.
And the trouble is, it's hard to say, well, if you're a really successful fast food restaurant, you need to provide a lot more.
Need
stacking
45.
space. But if you're not, you can have I mean, you can't
Right.
differentiate that way. You gotta be, you know, even-handed, but,
Right.
yeah.
We can't say we think you're gonna stink.
Yeah. We have no confidence in you.
Yeah, I think we just do the stack spaces based on customer rating. 4.5, it's this many, many,
How many
3.5.
stars do you have? Oh, you're not gonna need very many stack spots, okay. All right, last thing for me, and then we'll let somebody else have a turn. I do like the approach with, under industrial uses, the wholesale and warehousing, where, and we talked about this before, kind of that idea. 3 per 1,000 to start for the first 20,000, and then we're gonna go 1 per 1,000 after that. I do like that approach. I think that is meaningful, you know, makes more sense. So, thank you, Corey, for figuring that out. So, who else has questions for Corey now that I've gone on and on for 20 minutes?
I need to change that to 20 in the notes,
20 what?
20,
when it grows above 20,000, then you're to the 1 space per 1,000.
oh, yeah, to match the other
Yeah, to
column.
match the other column.
Yes. And update your stacking reference while you're at it.
Okay.
So-
Mackenzie will help you find it.
Just a thought on the church parking issue. Of course, you've heard the phrase, you don't build the church for Easter Sunday, right? And, you know, so our parking requirement, I mean, in any place where you've got an assembly, there's going to be a rare occasional event where it's going to fill the house and you're going to have overflow, right?
Those
But
are
if
all
that's
holiday
rare-
traditions or some type of festival or something.
Yeah,
like that.
some big deal, right? And in those, I mean, as long as that's rare and occasional, I think that's tolerable, right? You just don't want that to be the regular thing. And so I'm okay with a slight reduction in the parking requirement. I mean, 90% of the time, those lots have all kinds of excess space, you know? And even on a Sunday where there might be three different groups overlapping, you know, it might fill up, but not usually. So I don't have a concern about that, really. I think that slight reduction is probably reasonable. And then I guess my question about that is, when the lot does fill up on a very well-attended event, people overflow on street parking, right? And we don't have a law against that. And so that's an acceptable overflow. We just don't necessarily want to make that the rule. We want to make it the exception, right? I think where we're at achieves that. I'm okay with occasional street overflow parking.
I will mention this, that the nice thing is that the most recent satellite view from Google Maps was taken on a Sunday. And so it actually made it really nice to be able to see, oh, these lots are full, these ones have plenty of room, these ones have plenty of room, you know, so you can kind of see how they're being used today and whatever else. The only one that could potentially run out of space is the old white church over here. But
It's never full, though. That's where I attend.
well, I was gonna say, people like you can walk there.
Yeah.
To kind of piggyback on that thought, if you look at the retail, we went from 4 down to 3. You know, so if you make the argument that 4 has been a traditional accepted capacity for retail, ESI is saying 7 is accepted capacity for church, you know, the argument of 6 or 5 might be merited instead of the 7. But I'm just throwing that out there because the commercial you'll see in here did get reduced to 3.
I mean, on one hand, I do see things have changed a little bit, right? So, you know, back in the 70s when some of these churches were built, the whole family went to church together. They all piled into the station wagon and they drove down together. Now, sometimes the dailies go to church with 4 cars. You know, just the way things work out. So,
Got a point there. Single-family housing only requires 2 parking stalls. Take the Snyder family with 4 children within 6 years of each other, and then 2 other children later, yeah, my driveway was stacked with cars
yeah.
for a while. I'm glad they're all gone. Insurance has gone down, but
Sounds like a daily household management issue.
That's all right.
No, I do.
Yeah. No, I think that, you know, like I said, that's one of the reasons why I looked at that is I want to see what it actually would do in some of these, and I think it'll be okay. I think it'll be good. It'll work out. So. Plus, I really honestly don't see us building very many new churches in Centerville. And relocating churches, I mean, I guess you could tear down and rebuild, but whatever. It's not like we're Syracuse where they're building them on every other street, right?
right.
So, all right, sorry. Anything else?
The only other thing to bring up from our training a couple years back, I don't know how faithful the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has been committed to this, but they brought in their facility planners to a conference. It's about 2.5 years ago. And they talked about how they locate churches, and they were changing their regional model. And again, I haven't followed up on how well they've committed to this concept. But instead of locating it in every community and you walk to it, they were going to locate churches so that everybody had within a 20-minute drive. And so there was a movement to, and I think, you know, I'm just surmising, the idea is I'm planning a great big subdivision, I reserve this spot for the church, and then they pay X amount of dollars because they're going to have a guaranteed sale of a church there. Now they're just saying, okay, given the spillover needs, the development needs, we can't continue this pattern of putting one on every corner like a 7-Eleven. So now they started saying, as long as we can get the congregation to a facility within 20 minutes, that's our goal. So that starts driving and pushing people to travel, and it becomes a little closer, not, this is exaggerated, but a little closer to, you know, Walmart's example is you'll come from all over the county, so I will build a big parking lot so you'll never not have a stall. And now the churches are like, well, I got to plan on some travel, so it becomes a destination travel. But, you know, Snyder's walked to church through the young kid's life, but my next door neighbor drove to church, and we only live 6 houses away. So it seems like even if it's in your neighborhood,
People still, yeah.
people still drive.
All right. Anything else?
No, I think we talked quite a bit about the industrial warehouse situation, and I'm content with the way it's noted.
Anybody else down here?
I like the change for the shopping center,
Yeah.
because I'm hoping what it can do is allow for more, I don't know if it's possible, but it would be great if some of our giant parking lots could be converted into an additional retail space. Maybe that math calculation doesn't work, but I just see a lot of our parking lots are very empty, and it would be nice if they could be used for something else. Like, you know, the space between the Kohl's and the Home Depot is like no man's land. Target has a lot of space. And if you could put some additional shops there, or, I don't know, food trucks or something, to try to make some more commerce, I think that would be cool.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Those would all require site plan amendments, right? But yeah,
Yeah.
maybe people could look at that. I agree with you. I like the essentially the reduction from 4 per thousand to 3 per thousand. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, the other big one to think significant change is the discussion I've mentioned several times about office. It's at 5 per thousand based on some painful experiences. This would change it down to 3, which is more consistent with the market.
normal in the market, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the shopping center, that's a Walmart.
Yeah, the
As
Target.
well as a Target, okay, so that's big box as well as any commercial, okay.
Yep. Okay. Anything else? Any other comments, questions, concerns?
I appreciated the red line, I guess, that Corey put in about meeting the minimum landscape requirement. So thank you.
Well, I think that's, not only because I'm a planner, so it's easy to throw that in, but it's also the issue of, back to our discussion, well, if I can get a waiver on the parking, I can get a waiver on the landscaping, I can fill up the entire lot with a building. Oh, I'm ready to sell this 5 years later, and now
It's unusable.
it's, yeah,
We're stuck.
you're stuck. So, but I just did number 2 with the red lines to start getting the thought patterns. Lisa talked to me earlier, and maybe she can share some of her thoughts, but there are some other elements. So there's 3 sections to the parking modification. So you have the issue of residential roughly, you have the issue of commercial mixed use, kind of in the shared use concepts, and then you have just the parking study. And so like the industrial uses are not doing the commercial, they're just coming with a parking study saying, oh, I only need 2. You know, and so I went in and modified that. But Lisa, you talked about, you know, this whole issue of on-street parking, off-site parking.
Yeah, the shared parking, that,
We need to probably,
I remember when we were going through that the last time, it was either too vague or, you know, it just seemed like it was difficult to interpret, so we may want to tighten that as well while we're looking at the parking modifications.
so we were wondering, what are your thoughts preliminary on the parking? We could go back and craft some modifications and red edits to the whole section so that, you know, we can't do, I mean, I'm throwing the city under the bus. The Performing Arts Center has very little parking of its own site. It's borrowing. Now, fortunately, we participate as a city art redevelopment agency with the MTC, and we funded in partnership with the MTC, the parking deck there.
Yeah.
But prior to that parking deck, Colonial Lumber, Zions Bank, those were all approved, several sites approved for off-site parking.
Did it cause a problem?
Not at first, I don't think. I do know that there was complaints with the Colonial Lumber parking, and they had crossing the street there mid-block. That was problematic. MTC didn't struggle too much because it was happening after most of their
working hours.
office work. So the
Yeah.
main problem was crossing 400 West,
Probably in the dark.
and that was your main,
And there's a crosswalk there, right?
yeah.
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 But I don't think it caused serious problems, but again, it goes back to that idea of somebody has, because our code says we'll allow off-site parking. There's 2 components of our code. Certain percentage needs to be within 350 feet of your front door. So that's your Walmart, your Targets and stuff like that. But then after that, we can approve off-site parking as long as it's within 500 feet. And I think that's where the Bridge Community Church capitalized under the conditional use. We were concerned about it, so they grabbed a lot of surrounding parking. But in that ordinance, if it becomes unavailable, you're to notify the zoning administrator, and then it can come back to the commission for reevaluation. Well,
Who's
if
gonna
everybody
do that?
withdraws their permission to the property, what do you do now? So I think we should start thinking about how much off-site parking will cap to.
Like a percentage?
Yeah. So somebody can't bank it all.
Yeah.
You know, we heard it from Dave's Auto. Well, Les Schwab doesn't use half their stalls. We could borrow all of that. Why do I? So let me do this 80,000 square foot building and park down at Les Schwab. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, Les Schwab doesn't need it all, and Yeah, they are parking some of York Automotive's vehicles,
We heard that too, that was fun.
but we shouldn't be banking a predominant. So I don't think the Performing Arts Center should have had a predominant off-site. Fortunately for all of us,
Worked out.
that scenario didn't create a big problem.
Right. I do think it probably would be a good idea to look at the whole parking thing, because we're gonna notice the whole section, right, probably? Or
Yeah,
whatever you need. to
wherever we
notice.
want changes, we'll notice for.
Yeah, and I don't know, I don't wanna, put you on the spot, I don't know what exactly to do, but I don't know if you could look at stacking real quick and make sure that it seems to make sense,
Yeah, we can do that.
throwing that out at you, kinda out of the blue.
No, we can do that. So if you're okay, because this is a driven project by the commission, Lisa and I could go back and coordinate. I can talk to our engineer and see what they might have in the ITE manual without a study
Yeah,
on stack spacing. What does that manual say? How does it reference that? Look at ours.
yeah,
And then we could bring back a parking modification draft along with the stack parking draft before we go official to a public hearing.
okay.
If
Sounds
you're
good.
okay with that?
Yep,
Okay.
I like it.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Community Development Director's report and City Council report, Corey?
Oh, I don't think I put one on there, did I? Or did Mackenzie throw one on for me?
Oh, there's one on
None
there.
for you, but that doesn't say anything.
Thank you. Yeah, I happened to have COVID and
Yeah.
recovered from that. My wife got it, then I got it. I've been 7 days now with no symptoms, so still keep 6 feet away from me because I can't guarantee the world. But I got minor symptoms. Janie, my wife, got it really bad. I had my booster the week before I got it. So I'm attributing the booster made me have a head cold, and that's it. But anyhow, then I left town, so Mackenzie covered me. So that's my excuse. But your Bowler rezone, which was the lot line adjustment, and the Chad Morris rezone for the little square piece of property, both passed by the council. We're goals, we're at with our goals. They haven't
Yeah.
changed. A little
Yeah.
further on the parking tonight. Upcoming items, I know that, Mackenzie, what did the board say? We've got Hogan Steel Plant, manufacturing plant, I believe they've got their application in. This is.
The old Trinity?
Just north of the Trinity,
Okay,
the old Masco building.
okay.
There's 3 acres out front of that, and they're gonna redevelop that whole
And
site.
they have two items, a zone map amendment for PDO and a conceptual site plan.
All right.
And Mackenzie, is there another one in there?
And then food trucks again.
The city council did approve the food truck ordinance.
Oh, that's right.
There was some discussion about how it applied. We did talk about allowing food trucks on public rights of way, but they said, let's wait and see how it goes. Get our forms and applications ready. But they did ask some questions about how it applies to governmental entities for our 4th of July and other things. So we may be bringing back a very limited amendment to exclude governmental entities. Similar, in reviewing the ordinance, when I was putting all the edits in, there is a sentence in our temporary use permit that just says, this chapter doesn't apply to lawful activities of governmental entities. So they would like to see something like that so that we're not, because our new recreation coordinator also wants to do a number of other food truck activities. So we might bring forward and see what the planning commission thinks about that kind of exemption for governmental entities.
And what was interesting in council discussion, and I can't say whether it would have been a majority or not, because it was just mentioned, but they brought up the same thing the commission did about, well, can I have 2 or 3 on a limited basis at my yard, weddings? So it sounds like in the future, there is potential some appetite to consider broadening it, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, let's see how it goes.
So TikTok pressure in Centerville.
Yeah, well, and these statutes were, I think, enacted in 2019, so we've been lucky to we haven't had a lot of food truck applications, so.
Right.
we'll see. But there are more food truck amendments as well this year, so.
Okay. All right, let's move on to some minutes. Review these ones like we normally do. Does anybody have any adjustments, amendments on page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Yeah, I had one quick thing on page 3, just a question, I guess. Line 45, it says, "A resident of property adjacent to the proposed development expressed concern that the private lane would put traffic on 3 sides of his property." Wasn't that Chuck Madsen, or was that not
Yes.
Chuck Madsen?
That was
It
Chuck.
was Chuck Madsen.
Yes, it was.
So just edit that to say his name.
Yeah, or just include that somehow with the
Oh, 'cause,
previous
yeah, Chuck
paragraph.
Madson's reference in
'Cause-
39.
We have Chuck Madsen starting on 39, exactly, and then all of a sudden we go to some anonymous resident who happens to be Chuck Madsen. So, anyway, if we can edit that to make that, yeah.
Match. Yep.
Okay, anything on page 4? Page 5? Page 6? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to accept the minutes.
Okay, do we have a second?
I second.
Perfect, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Perfect. I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Perfect. We are adjourned. Thank you.